Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to Josh the Podcast. Hope you're doing awesome. Recording this a little earlier in the week than we usually do. It's Monday as I speak, and you're going to hear this Thursday. So, there's an opportunity for a whole lot more to happen. But just I wanted to touch on a couple of things. Watch for a link on my social accounts to me appearing on the Cesspool podcast. I had a lot of fun talking to those guys. We talked about um, some politics, some running. Um, yeah, they're a couple of guys from Missouri, so they're a little more conservative than I tend to lean. Uh, and we had a good conversation. An hour disappeared in a hurry, um, and so I'm looking forward to hearing the intro and outro to that. Again, watch for links on that. And I think last week we touched a little bit on the uh, Stephen Scalise shooting, um, and I wrote a blog post that was out this week on uh, just talking about what Ryan Singer had to say about changing the pizza, not the pizza box. It doesn't matter if we are fundamentally um, the same. If we change the appearance, we can change the shape of the box, we can uh, change the color, we can change the technology, but if inside we are the same pizza, we're going to keep getting the same results. And that's I think that comes up in our lives more and more these days. So go check out that post. It'll be in the show notes at joshshear.com. Talked to Jeff Sass today. I know I've been teasing this on the last couple of episodes, but finally had the conversation, and it was a lot of fun. Jeff has been out front in a lot of technology. He had Toxie, the Toxic Avenger, in an internet chat room in 1994. He worked on VR in the 90s. He worked on educational CD-ROMs in the 90s. 99, 2000, running a a price comparison tool via SMS. The way you can open an app now and just scan a barcode and have it tell you what it costs on Amazon or in Google Shopping or whatever. Um, he was doing that by text message. I'm saying a lot, and it's because it's early Monday morning. I apologize. I'm not anal enough to go take them out. I'm anal enough to try to be better the rest of this intro. I ummed while I was saying that. It's gonna be a great week. We get to do one of our favorite things this week, actually, and take a friend around our town. We like playing. We like showing off. We like showing off Savannah here. And I think I should start getting ready to shut up here and let you listen to me and Jeff. But before I do that, we are going to give away Jeff's book. I have a copy. It's called Everything I Know About Business and Marketing I Learned from the Toxic Avenger. And it's a fantastic marketing book. It's got great lessons. And he talks about the lessons that he learned while he was at Troma. From 1987 to 1994. If you're not familiar with Troma Studios, they put out a bunch of bad movies, and they've been doing it for 40 years. And it's the sort of place where you walk in, and you might be the one who signs the paychecks, but you might also be the stunt coordinator for a movie, or you might be the guy they hire to do weapons, and you wind up being a major character in the film. It's one of those small shops, get it done. It doesn't matter what your job description is, and I was thinking of my buddy Sean Flanagan back when we used to work at Gold's Gym, who every now and then would get up on the lift and vacuum the ceiling. And vacuuming the ceiling is not in anybody's job description, but sometimes somebody's just got to vacuum the ceiling. Well, sometimes shout in action isn't in your job description, but you got to do it anyway. So let's do the show, and like I said, skip ahead to the end, or don't skip ahead to the end. Listen all the way through to the end. Listen all the way through to the end. You're gonna enjoy this. I know it's long, but you're gonna enjoy this. Listen all the way to the end and find out how to win Jeff's book if you want it. And we'll see you at the other side of this interview. So my guest today is Jeffrey Sass, author of Marketing 101, Everything I Know About Business and Marketing I Learned from the Toxic Avenger, One Man's Journey to Hell's Kitchen and Back.
A nice, short, concise title.
Well, you actually have another subtitle on here, Real Business and Marketing Tips Learned from Making Classic Cult Movies.
Excellent.
At some point, I had to cut bait on the subtitles.
I'm nothing if not verbose.
Well, you learned that from the best, I think.
Well, thank you, Josh. It's great to be here.
So, people can look you up. I mean, jeffreysass.com, and you've done a lot that led you up to this book, and this book came out January of this year?
Actually, May, just a month ago.
Oh, so yeah. Wow, so it's brand new.
It's new. Yes.
So that's right. Your introduction was written in January. It was dated January, so probably took a couple months to press after that, huh?
Correct.
But apart from the book, you're going to do so much better introducing yourself than I will ever do. So take it away.
Sure. So as Josh mentioned, my name is Jeff Sass, and Josh kindly said I've done a lot of things. That's a polite way of saying I'm old, but I've been around the block a few times. Currently, I'm the CMO, the Chief Marketing Officer for .club domains. So we're actually the registry operator for the new domain extension .club. So instead of a web address that ends in .com or .biz or .org, you can get one that ends in .club. So that's what I do by day. I started my career a number of years ago in the film and television industry. And once upon a time, I worked for the low-budget film studio Troma. And a lot of the lessons I learned spending 7.5 years in Tromaville are things that throughout my career, no matter what industry I've ever been in, and I've been in, currently I'm in the domain name space. I've been in the video and computer game industry. I've been in the mobile content and mobile commerce industry. So I've been in a number of different industries. And in all those cases, as I look back at my career, I always can think back to things that the Troma experience, taught me that I carried forward after all these years. So finally I sat down and I wrote this book, which is really intended to share real legitimate, business, marketing, and entrepreneurship tips that are gleaned from 7 years making, wild and crazy, crappy movies. So it was a lot of fun, and I think the book is a lot of fun. It's easy to read. It's short chapters, so you don't have to worry. It's not like your typical business and marketing book. I think the lessons are real.
And not only that, but you did this great thing toward the end. So as I was reading, I was writing down takeaways from each chapter, and then you gave us a short chapter of takeaways from the previous chapters, which is fantastic because like you said, it's a short read. I sat down, I read it one morning. I said, I better read this so that we can schedule, and I just sat down and read it in a couple hours. And all the takeaways are right there too in a little takeaway section.
Yeah, I think the style I was inspired by a book I read recently by Stephen Pressman called "Nobody Wants to Read Your Shit." I believe that was the title, and it was great because obviously a good attention getting title, and that book also had lots of really good, smart insights, but it was really short and to the point. Every chapter was a half a page, a page. My book's a little bit longer than that book, and my chapters are a little bit longer. They might be 2 pages, but the idea of just having this book that was fun, entertaining, funny, yet still captured some, valuable tips. And yeah, you're right. At the end, I thought, why make it hard for everyone to go back? Let's just rehash the key points from some of the key chapters. And so that's what
Yeah,
I did.
well,
Yeah.
and that really gives it a second audience, right? If I mean, I think that the trauma angle is a big deal for a lot of people, but for people who don't care, um, you know, they don't have to. They don't, if they get tired of reading um, this is what I did for my job, and this is what this weird studio was like. Um, there's something for them in it.
Yeah, I think that you don't have to be a Troma fan to get something out of the book, but certainly if you are a Troma fan, you'll especially like, going behind the scenes. But I also think it's not just Troma per se. I think that most people have this fascination with the movie industry, and most people have this dream of Hollywood. Granted, my dream was fulfilled in Tromaville, not Hollywood. But this idea of getting behind the scenes of movies, I think, is something that most people have a general interest in. So I think framing business and marketing tips around the movie making process is something that a lot of people will appreciate, whether they've ever heard of Troma or not.
Well, and you get to see a lot of the movie making process there, huh?
Absolutely. I mean, that's the nice thing about, Troma as an opportunity. You're not going to go there to make any money. You're lucky to get lunch money, but you are going to go there to get experience, and you're going to have this opportunity to literally sink or swim, and a chance to do stuff that you've never done before, that you probably aren't qualified for. And most people won't make it. Most people will get frustrated. They'll end up crying. They'll leave. But a lot of people will rise to the occasion, and a few people will truly shine. And a lot of people who got their start in Troma have gone on to some very impressive and notable careers. A fun fact is, if you're a fan of Guardians of the Galaxy, James Gunn, the director and writer of those films, famously talks about Troma, how Troma gave him his start. So he started his first, experience in the filmmaking was at Troma. Well, when I left Troma in 1994, they hired James Gunn to replace me. So if you're a fan of the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, you need to go buy my book to thank me
Yeah,
for
if you
giving
hadn't
this
left,
opportunity to James.
gotten
If I
a whole
hadn't
lot of
left,
stuff.
he would have been just as successful, because he's far more talented than I could ever be. And I'm sure, while Troma gave him a chance, he would have found his way. Guy's loaded with talent.
Well, and it's funny because I think a lot of people, even if they're not involved in movies or interested in the back end, the production side of it, learning how to make them, it's good to see that this happens in every industry. If you've ever worked at a small coffee shop or a gym, or sometimes sometimes the ceiling needs to be vacuumed, and nobody has vacuumed the ceiling on the on their job description, right? Just if something needs to go, something needs to go. Somebody's got to do something. Something's got to get done. Somebody's going to do it.
Yeah, and I think that one of the chapters in the book talks about stepping up when an opportunity arises, right? And
Mhm.
not being afraid of doing something for the first time. Every director, from James Gunn to Steven Spielberg and everyone in between, there was a time in their life and career when they had never directed before, right?
Right.
Everyone in every field, every expert in every field imaginable was always had a first time, right? There's always a first time. So don't be afraid of that first time. Really embrace it. Embrace that opportunity, and keep your eyes open for it. No matter what your role is, no matter what business you're in, there's always opportunities floating around, and you just need to see them and grab them when you can. And don't be afraid to do something you've never done before.
So after, so you left Troma in 1994.
Yeah.
You've had some time to be out in the world since then.
Yes.
um, and you've seen technology do some amazing things in that time. I graduated high school in 1994, so I was also at that point where, I was starting to be an adult as technology was starting to do what it does. And if you had told us then that we'd be sitting in front of computers talking to each other face to face, um, we would have, we would not have really believed you. So what have what kind of industries have you kind of hopped into since then, and what sort
Yeah,
of?
so I've always been actually a bit of a geek and very focused and an early adopter when it comes to technology. So even back in the early Troma days when I started there, which was like 1987, the first IBM PCs were just coming out, and this idea of computers were just coming out. And I literally, was the one who encouraged Troma to bite the bullet and replace, typewriters and word processors with actual PCs and computers. And so we computerized Troma. And actually, one of the things that we did there and that I've always tried to do is really look to embrace new technologies and see how it could advance your business. So back then, before the World Wide Web was as we know it today, really the internet was comprised of networks like CompuServe and Prodigy. So these were even before AOL came in and kicked their ass, right? So I was very active in something called the Showbiz Forum on CompuServe back in those days. So this was an entertainment-based forum, and CompuServe at that time was not visual-based; it was a menu-based uh, interface, and you went into different forums of different topics. And the Showbiz Forum actually attracted a lot of people in the industry who were, tech savvy. Even film critic Roger Ebert was a frequent participant in that forum, and others who actually worked in the industry as well as people who were fans. So early on, I actually arranged to do live chats with the Toxic Avenger, in the Showbiz Forum on CompuServe. And so obviously we'd announce a time and I'd be sitting at the computer answering questions as if I were the Toxic Avenger. So when you think about that today, when every celebrity, fictional or real, can have followers in the millions on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and everything, and how easy it is to communicate, back then that was pretty forward thinking to have this character appear in the Showbiz Forum on CompuServe. What's a little bit scary about it is the people who were in that forum were mostly middle-aged men. So it was interesting that these middle-aged men who were tech geeks were engaging in conversation with this hideously deformed creature of superhuman size and strength. So, but you always have to embrace the technology, and I'll take it from Troma then to some other businesses. And technology is actually why I eventually left Troma. But we started, with doing stuff on the computers, but technology changed the film business, right? So when I started at Troma, most of the films were produced with theatrical distribution in mind. They played in theaters, even the second run theaters that Troma movies typically would play in. Then all of a sudden this thing, called home video came along, and all of a sudden a new market emerged for these movies to now be released on VHS, right? Home video. So now movies that were kind of on the shelf already, that had their theatrical run, suddenly had new life and could make new money through home video. And then, of course, VHS became DVD. And again, once again, the same movies that had been sold on VHS could now be sold on DVD. And then DVD became streaming. And Troma has a service called Troma Now, which is, live streaming of Troma movies. And they put a lot of their movies up on YouTube available for streaming. So, when you have content and when you have products and services that can be distributed through different technologies, you want to keep your eyes open and look for those new opportunities to repurpose and redistribute your stuff, as technology changes. And I left Troma because when we were doing the Toxic Crusaders cartoon series, which is another story we could talk about, I was making deals with Sega and Nintendo to do video games, based on the Toxic Crusaders. And as a geek, I became fascinated by the convergence of traditional entertainment with interactive entertainment, and having the opportunity to work directly with Sega and Nintendo, I became very interested. And eventually, I left Troma to join a company here in Florida, where I'm based now, called Game Tech, that was very active in the early days of CD-ROMs. The CD-ROMs were just emerging, and they were a big cartridge game. They did Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy for Nintendo, and I had done a deal with them on behalf of Troma for Reading Rainbow, and visited them a few times and really became fascinated by the video game industry. So that's when I left Troma and I worked in the video game
I'm going
industry
to
for a
stop
number
you
of
for
years.
1 second,
Yeah, sure.
because
Sorry.
I read the book,
So I know, but you just said the words Troma and Reading Rainbow. So you might want to explain how the Toxic Avenger Reading Rainbow wound up in the same sentence there.
Yeah, it's kind of it's a great story actually. So first of all, the big story was how Troma successfully took the Toxic Avenger, that was this disgusting character in an R-rated movie that had some pretty graphic violence, including a kid getting his head squashed by a car and stuff like that, and taking that character and moving him from R-rated movies to a Saturday morning cartoon series. So we actually successfully turned the Toxic Avenger into the Toxic Crusaders, and that was a successful Saturday morning cartoon show for a while, coming up kind of on the heels of the peak of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So while we were doing Toxic Crusaders, we got involved in licensing and merchandising. So we were doing the deals for Playmates toys and Marvel Comics and Worms or Pajamas and stationery and sneakers and T-shirts and everything you could put the Toxic Crusaders on. So once we got into that business and had all those contacts in the manufacturing world, we realized, we could represent other properties besides the Toxic Crusaders. We know people now in this business. We've got a little bit of a reputation. So I started looking for other properties that could use help with their licensing and merchandising. And Reading Rainbow, of course, is the Emmy Award-winning show on PBS. LeVar Burton starred on it. And I knew some folks at the production company that actually produced the show. It was owned by Public Broadcasting of Lincoln, Nebraska, and Buffalo, New York, but it was produced by a New York-based production house called Lancet Productions. So I inquired whether they had done anything with their licensing and merchandising, and they said they hadn't. So I had some ideas and basically got introduced to the owners of the show at the PBS stations and basically pitched them to have Troma, home of the Toxic Avenger, handle licensing and merchandising for Reading Rainbow, this revered award-winning show. And miraculously, they said yes. Obviously, there was some good negotiating going on and some clever creative ideas we presented. And in truth, instead of hiding behind Troma's reputation, that became a selling point where I basically, they had trouble trying to do licensing for Reading Rainbow because the show doesn't really have any characters per se. It's all about existing books, and they don't have the rights to merchandise those existing books. So traditional licensing was a challenge for the show. And we had some creative ideas of how to get around that by creating some new characters and some new art built around the Reading Rainbow logo and the theme of the show. And the fact that we had successfully taken the Toxic Avenger and turned it into the Toxic Crusaders was actually a selling point in our ability to do what no one else had done before, was figure out how to turn Reading Rainbow, which really doesn't have rights to the books that they show, into a merchandisable property. So that worked out pretty well. And in fact, it was Reading Rainbow that led me to the computer game business, because the deal I made with the company in Florida, Game Tech, was to do a series of educational CD-ROMs based on Reading Rainbow.
Gotcha.
And I assure your listeners that my stories here are much longer than the chapters in the book.
That's true.
What I just described voluminously, you can read in a page and a half and smile while you're reading it. So don't be discouraged by my too much talking after too much coffee this morning.
Never too much. Well, it is an audio medium, right? That's why people are here.
Yes, and I have the face for audio, so we're all set.
Yeah, right here with you. So you went on from Reading Rainbow, from helping Reading Rainbow get some merchandising together. You went into video games with Game Tech. You said you did some educational CD-ROMs with them. Yeah, I vaguely remember their logo sitting on some game cartridges from the old Nintendo, the original Nintendo, because that's what I grew up with. I grew up with Atari, and then we got a Nintendo eventually. And then from there, where did life take you?
Yeah, so once I was in the game business with Game Tech. So Game Tech, you're correct. They really started out in the cartridge business, and then they tried to expand into CD-ROMs as CD-ROMs were just emerging. So we did like the Reading Rainbows. We did a series of CD-ROMs with content from Saturday Night Live, which was a fun project. And eventually I went from Game Tech to another company in the game space called Intracorp Entertainment. They were based in Miami. And at Intracorp, I had the opportunity to work with William Shatner on his Tech War games. So that was a lot of fun. And being the marketing guy, I got to go on a number of press tours with Captain Kirk and accompany him, backstage on the Tonight Show and the Howard Stern Show, and all other places that we were promoting the game. So I spent a lot of time with him and have some really good Captain Kirk stories for another podcast. But he's a great guy, terrific sense of humor, and that was definitely a highlight to have a chance to work closely with him on that.
Yeah, he seems like a guy who's going to embrace the cheesiness that he kind of got charged with, and then he became more of himself and more of a caricature of himself. And him and Jack Nicholson, I think, are the two right now that if you look at him, they're like, oh, that's that guy.
Yeah, he's a very, very smart guy, very self-aware, as you said, great sense of humor, very caring, smart guy. It was a pleasure working with him. Yeah, and then from the video game business, took a downturn around 1997, and we tried to pivot the company to do virtual reality real estate walkthroughs using the Doom game engine. So we had a license to the Doom game engine, and we actually started doing these real estate walkthroughs, in that first-person world, which were really cool. And actually, developers loved them. We actually sold a few very expensive houses using it, but it was very labor-intensive. So it cost us a lot to model a house in that fashion, because we actually had to use game mappers and designers and developers. It took time, and the real estate world really wasn't, even though it worked, they really weren't willing to pay enough money to make it a practical business. And that company was called VR Tech, which would have been a great domain name. I wish we would have held on to it, because obviously now today, years later, VR and AR is all the rage, and doing virtual reality walkthroughs of real estate that we were doing in 1997 is kind of de rigueur today.
Yeah, well, much cheaper.
Yes, much cheaper, much easier. And that's true with all technology. And then from there, I started a company called barpoint.com. I co-founded that company, and that was an early player in mobile commerce. And we went public in 99, and in 2000, we had, again, way ahead of our time. We had technology that was on Sprint, AT&T, Singular, Nextel, and Verizon, where you could enter the barcode number for any product right on your phone and get back comparative pricing, reviews, look where you could buy it. Great stuff that seems normal today.
I was going to say, now anybody with an Amazon app does that in a
Absolutely.
camera phone. But yeah, I remember what the technology was like in 1999, 2000. Nobody had broadband yet. Nobody's phone was actually on the internet. And
it was WAP, the WAP browser.
If you were typing in a barcode number, like depending on the phone you had, you might have to. I mean, that's a 16-digit usually. So I mean, you had to press A 4 times to get to 1. Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't the ideal user experience.
But I mean the technology got there eventually. But the fact that we're thinking about that.
Yeah, and even now it's still barcodes and QR codes from a scanning perspective on the phone. They're still not used as much as we all thought they would be used back then. There are some good use cases, but there are also some bad use cases.
Yeah.
But every step along these ways, I found ways to go back to stuff I learned in Troma and apply it to those businesses. Coming from the entertainment industry, working with talent at Troma, I think that helped me deal with the likes of William Shatner, and just knowing how to talk to and deal with talent, throughout my career. Even at .Club, when we launched in 2014, we did a big launch with 50 Cent, right? Because when you think of 50 Cent, you think of the song In the Club, right? So it was a great tie-in with .Club. And again, my background in the entertainment industry helped me do that, and know what to do and know how to deal with his people and all that kind of stuff. So, everything you do in your career, a career, especially now, it's a long and winding road. But as long as you're improving and learning and taking lessons along the way, it's fun and exciting, and you can do different things and still benefit from the previous experiences you've had.
So let's go a different direction for a minute.
Sure.
And a lot of the people who listen to the podcast or the fitness and running and all that stuff, and you vlog about food.
Yeah.
So
Uh,
talk about your diet and a little bit about what you're doing there.
yeah. So I follow a vegan diet. So I've been vegan for about, gosh, probably not 12 years or so, and I've been vegetarian for 27 years. So stopped eating animal products except dairy 27 years ago, and then the last 12 years I cut out dairy, as well, and become a strict vegan. Um, Originally, it was a choice based on animal compassion, but eventually it stuck, and eventually it also led me to believe it, at least for me, it's a healthier diet. Obviously, it's a personal choice, and I'm not a radical vegan trying to beat everyone over the head and tell them not to eat meat. You have to make a choice for what's right for you, and for me, it's been right. But yes, I travel a lot, all over the world, so it's a challenge. It's kind of become a game for me to figure out how to get a decent vegan meal in odd places like Prague, which was really tough, and places in Germany and Ukraine and all over the world. I've been in China. So I often will post when I do figure out how to get something decent. I will post pictures of it on Instagram. So if you look at my Instagram feed, it's mostly images of various interesting looking vegan dishes. And I had an article that I wrote that was published in Entrepreneur on entrepreneur.com, which was kind of cool about, how I practice negotiating techniques to get these great vegan meals all over the world. So what I'll often do is go into a restaurant, even if it's a fine steakhouse, and I'll just tell the waiter to please, tell the chef that I'm vegan and that whatever he or she wants to prepare is fine with me as long as it's vegan. So I basically give them a challenge to look around the kitchen, see what they've got, and see what they want to come up with, as opposed to, trying to tell them what I want. I let them give me whatever they want as long as it's vegan, and it becomes a creative challenge for the chef. And when you think about it, they're making the same thing all night long from a prepared menu. All of a sudden, they're given this challenge. So more often than not, the chef will rise to the occasion. And I've had some unbelievable, off-menu vegan dishes at restaurants that don't have anything vegan on the menu. And oftentimes, the chef themselves will come out to the table to see how I liked it. So if it's a business dinner, everyone else is looking at me. Who's this guy? Why is the chef coming to talk to you? He never asked me how I liked my steak. So it's been kind of a fun adventure that I've written about. And I post a lot of those pictures along my travels.
Nice. Yeah. I mean, one of the things that Tim Ferriss has said in this podcast is that he'll go into a restaurant and say, what does the chef wish people would order more? Because what does he want to make? What's fun?
Yeah, exactly. Give them because chefs are creative by nature for the most part, but a lot of times at restaurants, especially a steakhouse, the menu is fairly rigid, right? So this gives them an opportunity to be more creative in the kitchen.
Right. And so, how did you get started in the domain business? That's fairly new, right? That just opened up a couple of years ago.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So after the video game business, I went and Barpoint. I went to work for a company called Mixer, Myxer, which at the time was like the #1 destination for ringtones and wallpapers for your mobile phone.
Okay.
And back when ringtones were a thing, Mixer had almost 90 million unique visitors a month. I mean, it was insane the amount of traffic we got for people to create their own ringtones and send them to their phone. So I was in that space for a number of years, and I was introduced by someone who also worked at Mixer to Colin Campbell, who was the founder of .club, and this was back in 2012. So what happened with the internet, which is really interesting and a lot of people don't realize, is ICANN, which is the organization that manages the internet domain space, back in 2011, they opened up the opportunity for anyone to apply for anything as a top-level domain. So the top-level domain is the bit to the right of the dot, like .com or .org or .biz. Those are the top-level domains. So you could have applied for .josh if you wanted to. You would just have to have paid the $185,000 application fee. And if you were the only one who applied for .josh, you would get it. if other people also applied, you'd have to compete with them. So the deadline for those applications was in January of 2012. Colin had applied for .club, just .club. And I met with him, and he explained the business to me, and he needed some marketing help, and it sounded fascinating. I knew very little about it. And I started out working with him, first as a consultant, because we didn't even know if we'd get the name. Turned out 2 other companies also applied for .club, and it took us a year of negotiations, finally ending in an auction in 2013 that we won for us to actually get the rights. So that's really how I came across that industry, and it's really been interesting because now there's an opportunity for you to get a domain name that's really easy to remember because it's relevant on both sides of the dot. You know, if you're an online store, you can have .shop. If you're a blogger, you can have .blog. If you're building a community around a product or service, you can have a .club. You know, we see a lot of different uses of .club. It's been going very well. And it's also very global, as I mentioned before. I travel a lot because the word club is the same all over the world. In China, they recognize CLUB in English as the word club. You see signs with it in Germany, in Japan, in Russia, literally all over the world. Club is club. So it's been a really interesting opportunity to see the world and really get more intimate with how the internet works.
Well, it was really forward thinking on Colin's part to get that, because when I first saw it, I was like, oh, well, that's kind of going to be a nightclubby kind of thing, and then I said, oh wait, no, everybody's got fan clubs.
Exactly.
I mean, you can even go to musicians, and everybody's got fan clubs, right? So
We see it used for fan clubs. Celebrities like Demi Lovato uses it for her fan club at Lovato.club. Also, obviously, existing clubs, golf clubs, country clubs. You mentioned nightclubs, but also anyone building a community around a product or service. A lot of subscription-based services now, like Coffee.club or Soap.club. A lot of startups that have a membership or subscription model can use .club. So there's a lot of different use cases beyond the obvious. Everyone always thinks of one thing first, and then they step back and think about it more and say, oh, but wait, there's also this and this and this. And then you really see how the word can really expand.
So you seem to have been on the front side of a lot of stuff. What's next? I mean,
it's
not
interesting.
necessarily
I think
for you, but what do you think's coming?
I think you mentioned earlier that podcasting is an audio medium, voice. I think what's happening right now with voice is really fascinating and really interesting. Everyone is talking about AR and VR, and I think that I'm probably in the camp that believes that AR will have more practical applications sooner than VR.
I agree.
For the general,
we've been working on VR for 20. I mean, it was in Hackers, and it's not a lot different. The way that was displayed in the movie in 1994.
Yeah.
But AR, I think has a practical application.
Yeah, I think the advances in voice recognition combined with cloud services are pretty remarkable. And when you think back to what it was like to even dictate to one of those services that would translate what you were saying and type it as you dictated it, versus how easy it is to ask a question in natural language to an Amazon. I won't say the name or my house is going to start, lights will start flashing in my house, but to an Amazon Echo device or Google Home.
Everybody
and how, but it's a convergence of two things. It's not just the voice capabilities and the voice recognition, but the cloud and the ability to access data so quickly. I just set up, Amazon came out with the Amazon Look, which is the one with the camera, that you could take pictures of your wardrobe. It's mostly, I think, geared toward women. So I bought one for my girlfriend and just set it up over the weekend for her. And it was remarkable how easy it is for someone who's not that tech savvy to understand it because you're just talking to it. And B, how quickly the responses were. I mean, you could ask a question or ask it to play a certain kind of music, and almost without hesitation, it starts playing, even a specific artist or a specific song. So the power of that now, as we move into the smart home and just using voice as almost the primary means of navigating the internet, is going to cause a lot of changes. I travel a lot, I mentioned, to China. In China, very few people chat by typing on their phone. You'll see people walking down the street and they're all carrying their phone, talking into it, right? And they're actually leaving short messages. It's asynchronous because WeChat, which is the most popular messaging app, and not just messaging. It does just about everything. It's everything you can imagine in one app. But WeChat has a very simple way to just leave a little short voice message instead of a text message, and that's how most of the kids in China are communicating. They'll just say something in their phone, pause. The other person's going to listen to it, say something back, pause. So you don't see people typing. You see people talking all the time.
Well, it's
And it's
interesting.
just starting to happen here.
My wife has been a big voice to text person. When she's texting, she always uses the voice button, and I've never gotten into that. But I think there's an option to just send a voice file, even just on an iPhone now.
There is. It's just not. It hasn't been widely adopted here the way it has in China. So if you look at that as kind of a peek at what's coming, you can see that the potential for that to really take over is very large, and that ties back into the whole domain name thing I mentioned earlier. Because if the input shifts more to natural language speaking, then having a domain name identifying your web destination by something that's more natural language, will help people find it when they're speaking. When they say, go to, they don't have to say something.com. They could say, just go to, for example, my book. The book is called Everything I Know About Business and Marketing I Learned from the Toxic Avenger. So a logical shortcut for that would be Toxic Avenger Marketing. So I registered the domain toxicavenger.marketing. There's actually a .marketing extension. And I have that redirect directly to the Amazon page for the book, because the Amazon URL is, loaded with numbers and letters and codes, and it's not anything practical. I could say, hey, go for my book. So that means you have to go to Amazon, you got to search, you got to remember my name or whatever. This way, I cut it short, get you right to the page. Just all you have to remember is toxicavenger.marketing. Really easy, relevant to the book. So that kind of natural language as the front end to the internet, I think is really interesting. And I think the technology's finally got to the point where that could become, the next big thing. And having all these devices in the home, and now Apple just announced theirs, is just going to accelerate that process.
Right, and so Amazon already had one, Google has one, right, and now
Apple announced theirs, and I think Microsoft has also announced one as well.
Okay. Is there a privacy concern with all the voice searching and cloud data?
I think that, I'm of the age where most of my peers are very concerned with privacy. My kids are the age where they couldn't care less and don't really think about it. I mean, you want to have a happy medium in between. You don't want to be careless, but by the same token, to live your life in a cocoon because you're overly fearful about privacy is not good either, because there's a lot of benefits. I mean, I love the fact that Google knows all this stuff about me because it makes my experience using Google services that much better, right?
It's so much. My life is so much better with them having my information.
Right. So I could cut them off, and I have friends, and peers who won't use Google services for that reason, and I think they're missing out, on certain benefits. And I can worry about privacy, but I also get in a car every day, and the likelihood of me getting into a bad car accident is probably statistically far greater than the likelihood of me getting hacked because I post stuff on the internet. Yes, it can happen. I'll take logical and intelligent precautions, but I'm not going to be fearful of it because I see right now, at least for me personally, the benefits outweigh the risks. I really enjoy predictive search. I enjoy when Google now reminds me of something or tells me something that I hadn't thought of or I forgot about because they know it from my email. It doesn't bother me.
And I mean, hacking aside, does Google having your information bother you? Especially if they're going to own stuff like Boston Dynamics. That's the one place I kind of someday.
Yeah, you fear Skynet, right? You fear Skynet.
Someday
we all fear
Skynet. See, I'm not. And then the one day I'm like, if I ever shut down my Google account, I'm worried about one of those robots showing up at my door.
Life's too short and unpredictable to worry about every little thing. I think, like I said, you want to take intelligent precautions, and that's going to be different for every person, right? It's personal taste, right? I think that you don't want to be ridiculously open where you're sharing stuff that's inviting trouble, but you don't want to be ridiculously closed where you're missing out on the benefits that technology has to offer.
Right. It's a matter of, are you going to let your neighbors knock on your door, or are you going
Yeah.
to just live in a tent in a field?
Yeah, or some
Oh,
people I know people who
or are
still
you going
leave
to
their
live
front doors
underground?
unlocked.
Yeah.
I don't, but they do.
So we do frequently, but nobody knows they live back here. Yeah. Every time we have a contractor down, they're like, "You sure there's a place back there? Because I don't think there is." Uh,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
So I think the benefits of technology outweigh the negatives from my perspective. But it's a spectrum, and everyone has to decide where they are in that spectrum.
right. So I want to back to the book just for a minute. You conceived the book from a presentation, right? Did I
Yes.
remember that correctly? Okay. Um, for people who want to follow that path, can you just kind of go over what that looks like, including um, how you get invited to do the presentation?
Okay. So when my kids were younger, they're all now in their mid to late 20s. When my kids were younger, I was a very active dad blogger. So back starting around 2009 or 10, I got involved in a dad blog called Datomatic.com that was launched by Chris Brogan. And I was a pretty prolific, dad blogger for a number of years, and got invited to a number of, influencers, so-called influencer events. I
Mm-hmm.
hate that term, but, events for brands where they invited mom and dad bloggers to come and experience something and then write about it. So I did a lot of, I was a Intel advisor for a while. I was a Sony Digidad, did a lot of work for Sony, did some events for LG. And then Ford had an event in Michigan. So I went to this Ford blogger event. And one night they said, we're going to have this thing called Ignite Talks. And the Ignite format is very cool if you've never done one or seen one. Basically, you get a 5-minute presentation, and it's supposed to be about something that's going to inspire, ignite thought. That's what's called Ignite. But the format is very structured. It's exactly 5 minutes, and you have to use exactly 20 slides, and each slide goes for 15 seconds, and then it switches to the next slide. So when you're presenting, you have no control over the slide. It's like go, and every 15 seconds, the slide changes, the slide changes, the slide changes. So you have to really plan your presentation in a
Right.
way that it's going to match the flow of the slides and this and that.
And
So I
you
was
got to
trying to
get
come up with a
comfortable
topic.
because so many people talk faster when they get in front of a group too, right? So,
Yeah, it's a cool format, and it was a cool challenge to try to come up with a presentation that would work in that format. And so I was trying to come up with what topic can I talk about that would be fun, funny, interesting, inspiring. And then for whatever reason, my Troma days popped into my head because I thought it'd be kind of visual. I could use pictures from some of the movies and stuff. And I had this idea to do a 5-minute presentation called "Everything I Know About Marketing I Learned from the Toxic Avenger." So that became my Ignite presentation. And in the presentation, because I had a lot of fun preparing it, I say at the end, I could go on. I only have 5 minutes, but I can go on all day about this. I could probably write a book about it. I probably will, right? And having made that statement, when I was done, I said to myself, maybe there is a book in this concept, and maybe it could be expanded. The concepts presented in those 5 minutes could be expanded into a book. And that thought stuck in my head for 5 years. That was in 2012 when I gave the presentation. But I mulled it over and thought about it and thought about it. And then eventually last year, I finally, had a situation where I was focused and disciplined enough to think that I could sit down and write a book, and I kind of set out to do so. So from there, I had made notes along the way, and I kind of had an outline of what the chapters would be. And then I dedicated pretty much an hour a night for about 9 months to just crank it out, get the book written.
well, and that seems like a very doable amount of time too for most people.
Yeah, yeah.
Is there a publisher on the book? Did you do this yourself?
So
I didn't.
I decided, I debated internally back and forth about whether I should
It's like
try to go the traditional route or self-publish. And I have some good friends who've done both, who have been New York Times best-selling publishers and who have also been very successful self-publishers. And the main reason I chose to self-publish is it's the technology behind it is so great right now, and I used
right.
Amazon's Create Space. And B, timing. I was done with writing the book, and I wanted to get it out. I wanted people to be able to see it. And if
Right.
I would have gone the traditional route, even if I succeeded, and I have some contacts in that world, so I probably think eventually I could have gotten a deal for the book, but it probably then wouldn't have come out till sometime next year, even in the
Right.
best of
So you get
circumstances, right?
18 months, 2 years on that probably.
Yeah, so I just wanted to get it out, and get it in people's hands. And I recommend this strongly for anyone who plans to self-publish. I still hired, a professional designer to do my cover. I hired a professional editor, so I invested money in the book. So I had a professional editor, go through it. I hired a professional interior design. So I really wanted it to, look as if it came from Random House or whoever, not like something not like I uploaded a Word
Yeah, I mean
file off
the
my
fact that I
computer.
had to ask, I mean, should cue people in that I mean this is a nice package.
Yeah, and I strongly recommend that if you're going to go through the trouble of writing a book and you want to publish it yourself, that's a great choice because you can do a great job of it. But it really makes a difference to get professionals involved, especially on the editing side. I mean, my editor helped me a great deal, and not just with obvious punctuation and that
Right.
kind of stuff, but just, validating certain aspects, giving me a few suggestions here and there. And that editing process really made the book a lot better.
Yeah, working with flow and yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So I
Oh,
highly
that's good.
recommend, if you're going to invest the time to write a book, invest some money. You don't have to go crazy, but you should invest some money up front to make sure that the book you put out there, looks and presents itself professionally.
Well, let me ask you, what was your favorite film that you worked on at Troma?
Well, I had a lot of fun on a lot of different films. I'd have to say, my favorite was probably Kabuki Man, because I was most intimately involved with that one, having co-written the screenplay and really was involved in the process from top to bottom. So that I'd probably have to say that was my favorite. But I think that, working on a lot of the others were also a lot of fun. And sometimes it wasn't just producing them. We would acquire a lot of independent films from young filmmakers, and sometimes we'd acquire something, for a few $100 that was a 16 millimeter student film, and then go into the editing room on video and try to clean it up, make it better, add some transitions, cut some stuff out, improve the music. And that process was often kind of fun. Like take something like what eventually became Curse of the Cannibal Confederates and taking this 16 millimeter student film that was probably shot over a weekend and actually fixing it up good enough to be sold for, $100,000 for video in Japan is kind of fun. Just being able to take something and brush it up a little bit and actually turn it into something that you could sell. Didn't really improve the quality of the film that much, but it made it saleable to a certain kind of market.
Right. Into the last little bit. Well, one of my favorite bits in Kabuki Man, and I think the time has passed. I don't have to say spoiler alert, right? If something's been out for 20 something years,
Exactly.
you get to just talk about it. Is there's a riddle. It starts, the dragon goes to the hoop of Jupiter, and then the tiger's gonna eat the nubile, and the monkey rides the jaguar.
Rides the jaguar, right?
and you're like, okay, well, we got to figure this riddle out. And no, there's no riddle. Like okay, so the dragon's really hoop of Jupiter thing but yeah, the bad guy's actually training a monkey to ride a jaguar.
The car.
Well, it winds up being a car, but
that's right.
the bad guy at first, had a monkey and a jaguar.
That's right. Yeah. It was pretty funny because we had to working with the animals was tough, and there was one scene there was a tiger in the movie too, and there was a scene where the tiger kind of went after the lion. Sorry, the lion went after the monkey, which was pretty scary for a few moments. That was interesting. And then, of course, in typical Troma low-budget filmmaking fashion, we knew we needed a Jaguar. We approached a few Jaguar dealers, and none of them would let us, borrow or rent a car. We didn't want to spend the money to rent a Jaguar. And we literally went through every cast member until we finally found one of the interns whose dad had that nice Jaguar, and managed to convince her. I'm not sure if she ever asked her father or not, but managed to convince her to bring the Jaguar to the set on the day we needed it, probably unaware that there would be a literal live monkey sitting in the front seat of his beautiful Corinthian leather or whatever you call that stuff. So the Jag was there with no cost to the production, other than perhaps our intern getting punished later on.
I'm going to live in the. I have to live in Tromaville for a little while, if you don't mind.
Dad, I'm going to take the car to work today. Yeah, okay.
Boy.
That was actually the most fun for me. In truth, Josh, the most fun of the filmmaking process for me was location scouting and location
Okay.
arranging. I just had a blast, going into a community, whether it was Peekskill, New York, or a church in Hoboken or whatever, and talking to someone and convincing them to let us film at their location for
You
no
like those
money.
magic words, right?
Yeah. I just really enjoyed the challenge of finding a location that would actually work well and look great on film, and at the same time the challenge of convincing someone to let you actually use it when you didn't have any budget to spend on it,
Right.
and when you were going to have 50 people tramping in, and cables and generators and lights and everything else, and getting them to say yes to that, and getting them to be happy when we left. To me, that was one of the most fun things.
That's always to be welcomed back, right? That's the
Yes.
big thing.
Yes.
I live in Savannah, and we have a lot of movies are shot here, but it's all like way above board, and they typically the tourism sites, your visit Savannah's, and everybody will let you know, oh hey, The Rock's in town shooting, and
Yeah.
um, but yeah, I guess that probably happens in New York a lot, huh?
Yeah, but we had
At
a lot
least
of fun, and it's it's a lot about being authentic and being honest with people, and those are kinds of the lessons. And I talk about that in the book. Like I had to go into Croton on Hudson, which is like a perfectly quaint little village overlooking the Hudson River, and we wanted to go in and get permission to literally blow up a house right in the middle of Croton on Hudson that was in a little lakeside community. But I knew that the house was scheduled for demolition anyway. So we had to convince them, instead of knocking it down, which you're scheduled to do anyway, let us blow it up first. And in those days there were no CGI effects. When we
Right.
blew up a house, it
You had to
involved
blow it up.
explosives and fire and everything else. And I convinced them that it would be a great learning experience for the local fire department. Right? They could have a training exercise because they'd have to be there to put out that fire. So here's when do they get a chance to work with a controlled explosion and put out a burning house, et cetera,
Right.
et cetera. And eventually they agreed on that basis, and they turned it into this big training exercise, and we got to blow up this house, and it was a great scene. And Croton on Hudson got the glory of being in the film, and some training for their fire department, and probably a lot of angry letters from the other residents in the area.
Well, the other thing that came out of the book that I think a lot of people, especially in the creative space, can take is the idea of repurposing.
Yep.
Blogs can become books, they can become videos, they can become audio file, they can become podcasts. I mean, if somebody's thinking about doing a podcast, they have 10 years of blog posts behind them. They can just go back and start reading their blog posts. But you mentioned in the book that there are a couple of scenes that were used over and over and over.
Yes. Troma was always ahead of its time. Lloyd Kaufman is a genius in that way. He's very, very shrewd marketer, great marketing instincts. And we shot this stunt where a car does a roll and a flip. We shot it, I think, in Hoboken, New Jersey, if I remember correctly. And it was a great stunt. And when it flips over, it does a 360 roll, not head over heels, but like a complete 360 roll, and lands back on its wheels. It was a pretty exciting stunt. And we shot that footage, and it was so good that Troma went on to use that exact same footage, the same rolling car footage, in about 10 different films. And what's interesting,
send it through a different colored filter every time.
Occasionally you might have, but for the most part, it was pretty much the same footage. So what was at first a very expensive stunt became a very cost-effective stunt when you amortize that shooting day over the 10 or so films it appeared in. But what's also interesting about it from a marketing lesson is it went from becoming something we did initially as cost savings, right, to add some production value to another film. It became fun for our fans. It became a bit of an Easter egg, where the real hardcore fans recognized it from movie to movie, and got to the point where every new Troma movie that came out, they were looking forward to saying, okay, when's the car flip going to happen? Where are they going to stick? Where are they going to stick it in this movie? So it became something that went from just simply repurposing content to finding a way to actually delight our fans. So
Right.
I think when marketers think about all the types of repurposing that you mentioned, where something becomes a blog post and then it goes to a Facebook post and then it's on LinkedIn and then it's Twitter, and as it goes down that path, what can you do to actually make it more make it a delight for your customers, surprise them in some way. So maybe there's something a little bit different you can do to it so that it's not exactly the same thing.
Right.
They'll recognize it as the same, but it has a little different twist. So it becomes a little bit more delightful. Look for ways to delight your customers. And I think content is always a good way. And creating Easter eggs, creating surprises is really good. And so that was kind of one of the lessons from that repurposing of that content.
Nice. So we've been here close to an hour.
Wow. I definitely talk too much.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, no, it's great. I mean, this is usually about the time that we look at that we start looking at each other and going, "Do you have anything else to say?"
Okay.
Having just met and everything. But do you have the last few things? Do you have any other lessons for people? Just from having lived life. Not even necessarily. From Troma, and where would you like people to find you?
Yeah. So I think, in terms of life lessons, as the old guy, I mean, a career especially is a journey, right? It's the long and winding road, and don't be afraid of the twists and turns along the way. I think there's a chapter in the book that talks about this a little bit. Everyone says, pursue your passion, pursue your dreams, et cetera, et cetera. That's not always so easy to do, and especially when you're starting out in your career, it's only natural that over the course of a career or a lifetime, you're going to have instances where you're not pursuing your dreams. You're not doing the perfect job. You don't really have something that is ideal, and you have to get through it and you have to succeed at it, because ultimately every success leads to the next. So whatever your situation you're in, you want to be as successful as you can about it. And I think the way to do that is to find something, and everything has something that you can find that resonates with you, that you can embrace and be passionate about it. So, it may not be what you thought it was beforehand, but look at what you're doing, and it doesn't matter what it is. And what is it about what you have to do that you can actually, this piece, I really enjoy doing this piece. I'm going to be super passionate, super good at that piece. So when it came to me and Troma, to be honest, I was never a huge Troma fan, before I went to work for them. And I never really was. Even to this day, I'm not like a hardcore fan of the movies. Like when I sit down on Saturday night to watch a movie, that's not going to be first on my list is to look for the latest Troma movie, right? That's just not me. But I went to work there because I wanted the opportunity, and I became a fan of, and I became passionate about the process of making movies. I loved making movies, right? I loved that process. And more importantly, for my success in the Troma world was I came to recognize that Troma had these really passionate fans, and the fans really loved the movies that we were producing. And even if I didn't love them as a viewer, I came to love making them for those fans. I wanted to serve the fans, and I became passionate about making the best damn Troma movie I could ever make, not because I wanted to sit at home and watch it, but because I wanted the Troma fans to watch it and enjoy it. I wanted them to be happy. So I was able to find my passion around serving the fans and making those great Troma movies for them, not for me, but for them. And so that helped me be very successful in the world of Troma, because I really did come to love what I was doing and be passionate about it for that reason. So I think no matter what situation you're in, you've got to look for that. You've got to look for the thing that you can embrace and be passionate about, and that will lead for your success. And over time, of course, over the life of a career, eventually, hopefully, your interests and your true passions can get closer and closer to being something you can earn a living on. But if you're waiting for that or striving only for that, it's going to be hard to get to it. So I think at every step of the way, you got to find something.
That's great advice too for anybody who thinks they're stuck in a dead end something too. I mean, if you're working behind the counter at a coffee shop and you hate it, don't feel like you got to love working there. But when somebody's really grateful to get a cup of coffee, like make them a great cup of coffee.
Yeah.
If you're not loving your job in a mechanic shop, just understand that the people who are bringing you a car to fix are really, really appreciative. And if you can do well by them, then that's your reward. It's not, okay, great, we fixed another thing, here's a paycheck. I think there's a lesson in that in every industry.
Yeah. And I think even in personal relationships, when you think about it, your boyfriend, girlfriend, spouse, whatever, you probably don't love every little bit of them, right? We all have things and quirks that annoy our partners, right? So what do we do in that relation? Naturally, we find the things that we do love about that person, right? And we focus on those positive traits, the things that we love, and we become passionate with that. And over time, it, your love grows, and you end up eventually loving the whole person, even though you may have started liking just this one thing. And the same is true with a career or a job. You know, find that one thing,
Mhm.
and if you can find it and embrace it, you'll find that over time, actually, everything feels pretty good because you're succeeding.
Well, thank you very much. Where can people find you online? Where do you hang out the most?
Yeah, so probably the most on Facebook and Twitter. So on Twitter, I'm at Sass, Sass. All the rest is like Sam, short and sweet. Facebook, it's Jeffrey Sass. For the book itself, as I mentioned earlier, a direct link to the Amazon page is toxicavenger.marketing. Also, there's a website for the book, and that's at everythingiknowabout.marketing. And I share some content there. And then for those of you who are too cheap to buy it, over time, I will release every chapter there on the website, bit by bit. So if you really want to be patient and read the book over a year, you can just go to the website and do that there. And hopefully somewhere along that time frame, you'll read enough of it to say, you know what, I'll throw $10 at Sass and buy a copy. And
Yeah,
it's $10 for the paperback, $5 for the Kindle version.
well worth it. Yeah.
Kindle's 99 cents if you buy the paperback, so you can get them both for $11. And thank you for saying it's well worth it, Josh. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, it was a great book. I really enjoyed it, and thank you so much for being here. Do you have any parting words? Anything you wish we had covered?
No, I think you asked great questions. We covered quite a bit, probably more than your listeners were expecting or needed, but sometimes TMI is good, right?
Yeah, that's right. All right. Well, you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Great. You too, Josh. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Hey, really hope you enjoyed that. If you want to win a copy of Jeff's book, here's what I want you to do. Follow me on Twitter at Josh Shear, Instagram at Joshua N. Shear, Facebook at Josh Shear. To take a picture of yourself listening to this podcast, or just a screen grab of you somewhere in this podcast. I don't know how to do that on an Android phone. If you're on an iPhone, you do that by pressing both the power and the home buttons at the same time, and that'll just wind up in your photo library. And then tweet me or post on Instagram and tag me, or just do it on Facebook. Anyway, post a photo of this particular podcast playing and tag me, and we will throw them in a randomizer and pull a winner. And I'll get in touch with you via the medium which you tagged me, and we'll grab an address and send the book off your way. Hey, I hope you have a great week, and I will see you next time. Yeah, bye-bye.